Hey, it's my friends. Well, welcome to Tuesday. We're taking a walk this week through emotional intelligence and emotional development in children. It's important for us to be aware of the various things that kids are going through so that we can help them deal with emotional development that would be taking place at this stage of life, even if we weren't in a quarantine. It's a part of what it means to be together as a family all the time and being aware of it. So for parents, this is really important, but parents, you'll also recognize that many of our own current emotional struggles we can trace back to our childhood. And this comes from every family. Nobody had a perfect family. Nobody had perfect parents. Nobody was a perfect child. So there are some things that go back to our own experiences in childhood that we're continuing to work out. That's okay. But what we want to be able to do for our own children in our families is to create as much stability during these times as possible and to have the most nurturing and encouraging environment for strong social emotional development that we can. Yesterday we talked about the birth to 3 years and how, and again, this is kind of my version of this. You can read whole books and many books, and people do their entire careers studying this stuff. So this is a quick overview. But in the birth to 3 years, much of our emotional wiring takes place. Now, we're going to work with that wiring as we get older, and especially in adolescence, there's some major changes that can take place. But the reality is a lot of our emotional orientation, our emotional bent is kind of set when we're in that birth to 3 year. And so that's why we want to provide as much stability during that time as possible and not to overreact to kids, because what we're really gearing towards is emotional regulation, not having anger, not avoiding anger or sadness or frustration, but regulating those emotions in a healthy way. And we want to talk about regulating, not repressing. We don't want to tell kids that they shouldn't feel a certain way. We want to help them regulate the feelings that they do have. Emotions are not good or bad. They're not a moral issue. But oftentimes, when kids are having emotional control difficulties, the older children or the adults will essentially shame or guilt the kids for having the emotions that they're having. They will get mad at a 3-year-old for being angry. That's not going to help. We can't expect adult-level regulation from 3-year-olds. But you see this, and if you want to see this, you can go to just any large box store. Even today, you can go to Walmart or a place like that, and you will see all kinds of parenting. And one of the things you'll see is kids having emotional reactions and not regulating them, and then being essentially shamed or belittled for having those emotional reactions. We want to avoid that to the extent that we can. When kids are young, from birth to 3, they really need a lot of external regulation. They need parents that are there for them to help contain their emotional reactions, but not eliminate their emotions. And that's one of the problems. Now, as they get a little bit older, today we're kind of talking about, okay, after 3, the rest of the preschool years and into early elementary, this is a big time for learning to self-regulate emotions. Not to not have the emotions, not to avoid being angry. This is never an appropriate or useful thing to say. Well, you shouldn't be angry. Kids get angry. I get angry. You get angry. But instead, when you are angry, what can you do? And one of the most important parts of this time is the role that play, and especially imaginary play, has for kids learning to regulate their emotions. When kids are engaged in imaginary play, a lot of what they're doing is playing out scenarios and talking themselves through how people deal with the things that they deal with. And that's one of the reasons why really competent play therapists are able to work with kids in this age group and to kind of figure out what's going on in their life, because kids are working out life through play. I love what I heard Ruby Payne say once. She said that for kids, play is the way they learn about and understand their lives. They work out how life works in play. For adults, play is how we escape life. We use play as entertainment or as a reward for something to get away from the stress of life. So kids are working out the stress of life through play. Adults are escaping the stress of life through play. The problem is that adults, when kids are having trouble, will punish them by taking away play because that's the thing that they see as a reward for doing the thing they're supposed to do. We see this even in schools when kids lose recess and they don't get to play because they were not doing something responsible. And for kids, especially younger kids, imaginary play is so important. If kids are going to learn to regulate their emotions, they have to have lots of access to that kind of play during their early childhood years. And here's what's important. You don't learn to regulate yourself, your emotions, your brain, looking at a screen. I can't say this strong enough. There's nothing wrong with video games. There's nothing wrong with watching YouTube videos, but you don't learn to regulate your emotions personally unless you are in situations where you have to regulate them yourselves. Imaginary play does that. Playing outside does that. But watching a screen does not teach regulation. Kids who spend too much time on screens, and that's probably anything more than an hour or two a day, and I know that's a crazy thing for me to say. At these younger ages, some experts recommend no screen time until kids can read. Can you imagine? Maybe that's not the world we live in right now, but here's what's important. If you want your kids to learn to regulate their own emotions so you don't have to contain them, they have to be in situations where they use their own brain. And a screen becomes the regulation for the child. So here's the encouragement. If you can provide good, stable instruction, if you can allow your kids to have their emotions, not repress your emotions, not pretend you don't have the emotions, but instead learn to regulate them, work with your kids when they get angry, when they get sad. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be worried. But here's what we do when we are worried. And if you can provide your kids with lots of opportunities for imaginary play, even if that imaginary play requires a little input from you, you're going to have healthier kids. This is what's happening during early childhood. I hope that's really important and useful for you. Tomorrow we're going to talk about a little bit later childhood. Then we're going to get into the onset of adolescence. And then later in the week, the last day, we'll talk about the full-grown adolescents, the later high school kids, and some of the things that these different stages are going through. I hope this is useful. If you didn't see yesterday's, you can go back to that. For today, the important message is kids need a lot of imaginary play in their early childhood, preschool, post 3 years old, until they're probably 6, 7, 8 years old. A lot of imaginary play will help them learn to regulate their emotions, and that's our goal for our kids. All right, have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.